to another episode of Takeaways with Kay. Man, I know it's been a while since we last spoke, and at first, I had some good reason, and then the reason just wasn't good enough after some time. But we'll get into that at a later date. Okay, no, actually, let's just get into it now. Essentially, I recorded a podcast episode in July, set to be released at some point in the month of July. But I really liked the podcast episode. Like, I didn't feel like I prepared enough. It didn't feel as though it was something that should have been published. And I think in that as well, there was just some like, I guess like beating myself up about it. I guess like I low-key punished myself. Like low-key punished myself in a way where I was like, okay, like, girl, if you can't get it together for the podcast, then just don't post. Which doesn't really make sense. But that's what happened. I recorded, I didn't like it. And instead of just like re-recording, I just did not. But that really worked out for me. Not for you, but for me. Because a better episode is coming. Better episodes. I'm gonna go back to that last episode I recorded and try to see if I can salvage it in some way. But if not, I'll probably just take bits and pieces from it here and there and use it in other episodes instead. So maybe you'll hear it, maybe you won't, maybe you'll just hear bits and pieces integrated into whatever comes after this episode. But yeah, for now, welcome. If you're new, welcome to Takeaways with Kay, the podcast. And if you're returning, welcome back. Thank you so much for coming back. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that you are here. So if you could not tell from the title or the description, today we're going to talk about using my voice and how I had an unintentional break from worship. You know what? Let's just get into it. So, this last Sunday, I sang at church for the first time on a stage since last September. As in, it's been like a full 12 months since I last sang on a stage to worship, like here in LA specifically. I've done like one or two Sundays in this last year at my home church in Maryland, but in LA I have not sang on a stage in church since last September. And honestly, I did not think it was going to be a full like 12-month period process. The whole break, I guess you can call it, let's just call it that. Like this whole break has been quite a journey for me. It's been quite healing to be back or to have come back. I say to be back as if it's been a long time of being back or it's been multiple times. It's literally just this past Sunday, but like even the process of just coming back to this space was quite healing for me. And I'm honestly and truly so grateful that I'm in the space that I'm in to return. And not just return like to where I was, but to get back to that space and exceed where I was before. Yep, that's good. Yeah. So it was just such a good experience overall. I love our choir director. He is so amazing. Shout out to Jason McKee. If you know, you know. What a wonderful man of God. What a wonderful man of God. I love Jason so much. I would tell anyone if they ask about Jason, I'm like, that's the guy. He really knows what he's doing. He really is so led by God, and I'm honestly and truly just so grateful for him. He's amazing. So, under his leadership, praise the Lord, for the second time ever since I've been in LA. And the thing is, like, I haven't stopped singing. I just hadn't been singing here publicly. And last September, I transitioned out of my first church in LA, and I had like this 2 to 3 month period where I noticed that my singing just heavily declined because I wasn't part of a team anymore. I had found a church by that time, but even still, I was not serving. I was just attending the church and trying to figure out like this church that I had just started going to, but I was not singing anywhere for Jesus, like anywhere. I don't know why I said that, but I wasn't singing anywhere. And so the practice wasn't the same, the amount of singing wasn't the same. And like, I did not like that. Once I clocked that and realized that I had not been singing as much as I used to, I had to like figure out like how to make that work. So since then, I worked towards that, and my worship has just been kept in house. Quite literally, quite literally in house, like just me and God in my room, in my shower, in the living room, like just us. God and I, the Holy Spirit and I, Jesus and I. That's really it. And what's interesting to me, honestly, kind of a hee hee, ha ha moment between God and I, is that a few months before I went on this break, I received a prophecy at this conference that I attended about my worship and how my worship will be used. And like, I'm not going to get into exactly what was said, but I remember receiving that and being like, okay, like, I cannot wait to go back home and go back to my church and really, pray towards this prophecy and really put in the work to see this come to pass. Do you get what I mean? Not necessarily in like a assistant to God kind of way and trying to like force something to happen, but more so of just like, really honing in on the skill and honing in on what the Holy Spirit is working on in me, and really just trying to be open and aware. Do you get what I mean? 2 months later, I transitioned out of my church at the time. And that's when this 1 year stretch began. But what's even funnier is that on my last day at that church, someone stopped me and was like, I was looking for you. And I feel like the Lord wants me to tell you. And if you know me so well, like if you know me, you know that I run away from that kind of thing. When somebody starts talking about, God wanted me to tell you, I'm like, please. I'm just like, oh gosh, what am I about to get into? Or like, what am I about to hear? The thing is, like, once the prophecy comes, once the word comes, you can't unknow the word. Once God tells you something, you can't unknow it. You can't just be pretending like, oh, I didn't hear that. Or like, oh, my noise blockers were on. Like, once you know, you can't unknow. And so, I'm not scared of prophecy. But sometimes sometimes I just want to be like, actually, keep that one to yourself. Maybe write it down in a note. Give me a day to open it in like 2 years from now. I'm just kidding, but like I'm not. But like I'm just kidding, but like I'm not. But I'm just kidding. Jesus, you hear that? I'm just kidding. So that happened on my last day, like my very last Sunday. And I don't think at the time the person who was speaking to me knew exactly that it was my last Sunday. But I do know that like my worship was like, it was a little bit different. Like I even felt like some kind of difference in my worship that Sunday. But Maybe she did know, because that's a prophetic woman right there. Shout out to her. But yeah, she had told me, again, it was like another way that God was going to use my worship, and how my worship is even being used. Like she talked about that set specifically that we had did that morning, and how she was seeing my worship being used in the spirit. And I was like, wow, that's first of all amazing, because I've never heard somebody articulate how somebody's gift was being used in the spirit in that way. And then she also was like, I don't know, but this specific worship leader is coming to mind. And it's just so funny because I get that often. I get that often from people, but she does not know that. But it's just one of those things where I was like, why? I think that was one of like, I mean, there was definitely a reason behind that comparison. And one day I too will understand what that exactly means. But it's just funny because it's like this running joke between some of my friends and I. But back to why we're really here. So a few days ago at the first rehearsal, there was a devotional, a word of encouragement, devotional type of style, situation, setting. Whenever the people gather, somebody gotta share what God, has been impressing on their hearts. And at this rehearsal, someone spoke about how the promise is still the promise, is still the promise, and how essentially, like, the promise you received in one season doesn't change just because your season has changed, because God doesn't change. It's like the promise still stands regardless. Come on, Elevation Worship. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. Whoa, yeah. That's a faithful God right there. We serve a faithful God for real. But yes, the promise is still the promise, because God is still God. Like, because He doesn't change, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The promise that He gave us in one season, like, because our seasons changed, because the time has changed, because we moved location, like, the promise is still that. And that really hit hard for me, because I was like, whoa, look at where I am right now. Like, I'm in a rehearsal after 1 year. I'm in a rehearsal. This is so wild to me. And it made me think about how I had this thought come to mind. And this is why it's important to know that not every thought is your own. And also why Paul tells us in the New Testament that we are to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. I had this thought come to mind of, you're never going to lead worship in church again, or like serve in a worship ministry again, like that kind of thought. And I was like, whoa, where's that even coming from? Like, what do you mean by that? I was like, whoa, where did that come from? But exactly what came to mind was these prophecies that I had received right before I left my first church. And I was like, there's just no way. Like, I didn't even entertain that thought for as long as I could have, because I just knew, like, that's not true. Like, that's not mine. That's not of God. Because I know what God has said. Not once, but multiple times. Not once, but twice. And I know the desires He's also put inside of me. And none of those things aligned with that passing thought. And one thing that also came to mind was my father, my literal dad. And one thing my dad will always remind us is that we should not entertain conversation with the devil, because he is the father of lies. the father. Not just that he lies or he deceives, but he is the father of lies. And like, let's really think about that for a moment, because if you know that someone is a compulsive liar, are you really going to take time out of your day to try and have a genuine conversation with them? I think not. Exactly. So it's like, why, when it comes to certain thoughts that we know are just not true about us, or like certain things that are said or thought that we know is not aligned with God's truth, like, why do we even entertain that? Like, why would we ever entertain conversation with the devil? Question mark. Like, we know how he moves. He's a lame. Like, he really keeps trying it when he's already been defeated. Like, why should we even entertain that? It's when we start entertaining those thoughts that we start overthinking, that we start spiraling, and all of that. Like, it's just and it's never worth it. It's never worth it to entertain those conversations, and it never will be. So this is my plug. I'm letting you know, just stop it right here, right now. As much as you can, as much as you can, once you realize you're spiraling, or once you realize you start overthinking, cut it off right there and then, and make it a habit to take every thought captive. Replace those kinds of thoughts that are negative, that are not aligned with God's truth, and replace them with what you know to be true about you through Christ. When Paul says to make it obedient to Christ, quite literally, take that thought and make it a truth from the word. If you feel like, I'm not capable, I'm not good enough, I can't even like overcome this day, immediately be like, actually, I'm more than a conqueror through Christ. Like, start really spitting. Like, if you start having worries or doubt, like, I just don't know how this gonna I don't know how this is gonna happen, be telling yourself to not be anxious about anything, to cast your cares upon Christ because he cares for you. Start telling yourself those things, because it's just so important to be grounded in what you know is true, and be taking the thoughts captive and replacing them with God's truth in your life, because that's something that you can actually hold on to, and it does not change. It does not change. It will always remain true. As I was journaling, I was having revelation about different things, so many different things. And one of those things is that since I've been, I want to say out of commission, but since I was on break, I was just not singing. I was still using my voice, but I was not singing. But because I was not singing, I was forced to use my voice in other ways. And that truly was the journey that I was on in these last 12 months. Part of that actually started before this like 1 year break even began, but it really came full force once last September hit. Pretty much like after my last Sunday last September at my first church, like full force from October on, full force using my voice in a different way because I was no longer leading worship. And it emphasized to me that when it comes to ministry, like looking back, I was able to hide behind worship or hide behind music and not use my voice for other things. Like, even when pastors would instruct us to pray, like, I would still be like low-key singing. I wouldn't be like praying like I want to say with still words. I don't know. I don't know why that was the first thing that came to mind. I mean, like, my prayers would not be like me talking. It would be a lot of singing. And I would notice it, but because singing was just so comforting to me, I would find myself still singing at those times. But in this last year, yeah, this last year, I'm surprised my voice has not given out. Just kidding, just kidding. But you guys would think I'm like a certified yapper at this point because, wow, okay, not too much, but like I've really been challenged to use my voice in other ways, like outside of singing. And I've been challenged to like pray out loud more and pray with people more and pray in public, like scary. And I've been prompted to like give words of encouragement more, both generally and very specifically, and even like speak life into people and, you know, operates in the prophetic in an interesting way. And that has been quite a journey in itself too that we are really very much still on. But I mean, like, guys, I'm even here talking to you on a with a microphone. I'm here with a microphone speaking to you all, like hosting a podcast, speaking to people in this capacity is so wow to me. Like, if you told me that all of this was going to happen within a year, I would have been like, which Kumam are you talking about? Which Kumam is doing all of that? It must be a different Kumam. Like, let me go and meet her because it's not me. But the capacity increase has just been there. Like, it's been happening. It's been challenging. It's been very formative. And it's also been beautiful as well. And just going back to like how God's promise is his promise. When I think back to last summer, when I received the first word of prophecy at the conference, it's funny that, like, for me, the funny part, it's not funny, but like, for me, the funny part is that I received that word, and then 2 months later, I'm leaving church worship leadership. Like, my circumstances were not matching that word received at all. And for the next months, 12 months, 11 months, 9 months, how many months? Oof, math. For the next several months, the circumstances were not matching that word at all. And for me, at that time, I was like, remember when? Remember when? Sometimes I would go back in my notes and be like, remember when? And then I would just be like, what are we doing now? What are we doing now? And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, like when your circumstances are not looking like the word that you received, and then you kind of start questioning or wondering, like, did I really hear that correctly? Or like, maybe I misinterpreted, or maybe, I don't know. But this past week, hearing that the promise is still the promise because God is still God, something I didn't even know I honestly needed to hear. Like, I truly did not know I needed to hear that. But once it hit me, it's one of those words that really like slapped me across the face and made me really sit and say, wow. That was specifically for me. It just honestly like wrapped up so much of what I had been reflecting on in the days before, actually. One thing about me, I'm a reflect. Because one thing about me, I'm gonna reflect. I'm gonna think about certain things for some times and let it sit. And I'm not an external processor. I'm very much an internal processor, and I also need time to process things and take things in. And it's a lot of questions that will come to mind in my processing, and a lot of talking to God and just kind of trying to figure things out. And that's hard for me to do externally, very much so. But sometimes, every so often I try it. But more recently the processing has become a little bit quicker, a little bit faster. Shout out to the Holy Spirit. But that message last week really did, yeah, that one really did something for me. It really felt like that message specifically was just for me. It was like God's way of just saying like, hey, remember all these things we were thinking about in just in one sentence, this is what it is. And I love that so much because definitely a reminder that God hears me, that he loves me, he sees me, and he cares about me so much. And the things that I think about too are the things that I care about too. And it reminds me of the verse that says that he delights in every detail of our lives. Like all the things that I will think about, the things that I care about, like God cares about that as well. And I just love that so much. But as I've been reflecting on using my voice and just this like 1 year break, I have seen and heard and said a lot in these last 12 months. Most of all, I'm really just grateful for the ability to use my voice in a different way, not only to serve God, but also to, grow personally as well, because I've also used my voice to advocate for myself in different ways. And while that advocacy was not initially started in these last 12 months, it's definitely, again, just like everything else, something that I've been confronted with more in these last 12 months. Like I've really had to kind of push myself to really advocate for myself. And one of the things that has really helped me to do that even more so is telling myself that I am worth the work that it takes. I am worth the effort that it takes to put in to advocate for myself. Because sometimes I can not advocate for myself because I'm like, it will be so tiring. It's like it'll come with a lot. Like it's never just that one statement or that one thing to do. It then comes with it always comes with other things, And just the thought of that can be exhausting sometimes. Just the thought of that can feel so somehow, like just so somehow. And I'm like, I'd rather just keep my mouth shut, keep it cute, keep it quiet, and go and sit down somewhere and move on. But God is like, no, babes, you actually need to do this. Like, this is actually an important skill for you to learn. And it's true. It's very true. It's important. It's an important skill to learn for myself. It's important not just for like my personal life, but it's important in my relationships. It's important in how I serve. It's important in the work that I do. It's important just overall. And it also has helped me to see myself differently because of this thing that I tell myself, that I am worth the work that it takes. I am worth the work that it takes. Like I always, like kind of hype myself up with that before having to do some self-advocacy. And it's helped me to grow a certain confidence in myself. I think that this is what God has wanted me to learn from self-advocacy at this time, to remember that I truly am worth it, what it takes, worth the effort that it takes and the energy that it takes and all the other things that it takes to advocate for myself in this time. And I've seen that growth even in just like how I form relationships with people, how I've been forming relationships with people in these last 12 months, and even just having more courage to say, like, I like this thing, I actually don't like that, or having the courage to be like, this thing that you did not love that, let's not repeat that. Still love you though, but like, let's not do that. Having the courage to say like, okay, like this place or these people or whatever is not good for me, so I'm not gonna continue in that, and really help me to let go of these people pleasing tendencies that I'm still finding within myself or uncovering and didn't realize that I even had in the first place. Yeah, that's been another thing that I've realized has changed as well in learning how to use my voice in a different way, of just letting go of the desire to be liked by everyone as well. And this seems like loosely, very, very, very loosely connected, but it still is, because I've been able to grow more within myself. I don't need or even really desire the opinion of man in the same way that I used to. And that's a big one. That's a big one for me. And I'm honestly grateful for that. As much as I can say, like, as much as I can still find myself not running towards self advocacy, I do see the benefit of it and still push myself and have other people around me who push me to continue to use that skill, because it's necessary and there's so many benefits to having it. I think that overall, one of the biggest things that I've gotten from this 1 year break, I've grown so much spiritually, just in a very different way. I've also experienced healing in a very unconventional way, and continue to experience and continue to experience healing in this very unconventional way. I'm in my healing era. I'm very much in my healing era right now. And God is definitely healing me from things that I didn't know I needed healing from, and things I definitely downplayed the need of healing from. And it's just not even in the way that I thought was going to happen, or I could have thought would happen. But I'm glad to be in this space. And in terms of growing spiritually, these these spiritual disciplines that we have as Christians, I've seen myself go deeper in, or feel more freedom in, or even just like step away from this idea that I need to do these things so that I'm full enough to serve. Yeah. Yeah, that's really the one for me, because when you're serving a lot, when you're serving, yeah, when you're serving a lot, especially with like no breaks, it can feel as though sometimes, I don't know, at least for me, it felt as though sometimes I was really doing certain things so that I could pour out. Doing certain things so that I can pour out, or even doing just enough so that I have just enough to pour out, and then feeling an extreme tiredness after that because I've given quite literally all I have to give. You get what I mean? And so, not serving in that capacity really pushed me back to my first love, has pushed me back to true intimacy with Christ, where it's not like because of what I can get or what I can do from that place, but because I enjoy spending time with God, because I love learning more about God, because I love Jesus and I want to know him more, and I want to spend time with him more, and I want to understand him more. And so I've been able to grow in an understanding and grow in my like literally my relationship with him, and not for other people, but quite literally for myself. And while in turn it has actually impacted my relationship with other people, that was not the reason. Or maybe I should say that was not my reason. I've seen in these last, especially in these last like few months, how coming back to what matters, coming back to the simplicity of Jesus, coming back to the simplicity of the gospel, coming back to my first love, yeah, has caused me to grow so much more than I could have imagined this like break could have done for me. And I'm loving where I'm at, and I think that's also why I felt so much peace about this part of, I'll say, it's part of the reason why I felt so much peace about, okay, now I believe I can serve. Now I feel I'm in the right place to serve, like physically in the right place, and then also like spiritually in the right place. When I say physically, I mean like at the right church to serve, and then to serve again, and then also like just spiritually like in the right place to serve again. And so my encouragement to you all is just remember that it is such a privilege to serve. It is such a privilege to serve God and serve his people. And it's so amazing to be able to partner with him in this life that we live, because he does not need us to do the things that he wants to do, but he chooses to partner with us. And I think that's so amazing and something that we should not take for granted. And it's something that we should really, do with so much joy and do with so much love and do with so much wisdom. Do with wisdom. So, yeah, that's really it from me. That's really all. I hope that you all were able to take something away from this episode. I hope that it causes you to think and reflect and share with a friend and pray and talk to God and just with the Holy Spirit about what's been on your mind and in your heart. With that being said, that's the end of this episode. I will talk to you guys later. I think I got it. I'll talk to you guys later. And yeah. Now I got it and I got too excited. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.